Good evening, folks. Activate Worcester. Ron Motta, your host. And glad to report that I think we've seen the last of Old Man Winter. He kicked that butt pretty good twice in a row over the last couple of weeks. 67 degrees out today or something today. It's going to be 70 on Friday.
It's good.
Loving it, loving it. You could just feel it. People are feeling more energized. They're out into the streets. It's good. We needed this as a change. Well, one of the things we don't change is our in-house consigliere when it comes to things politic, the body politic, is our friend Jay Givan. Jay back again. Flew
Good to
him
be
in
here.
all the way from West Boylston.
West.
Not Boylston, West Boylston, at great expense to the station, but well worth every penny that we paid for this. Thank you for joining us today.
Sure.
And we're not going to be talking ball game. We're not going to be talking like weather, although we've kind of started with that. We are going to be talking about the local weather from an environment perspective, and I don't mean, all the way up there. I mean where we live down in the street. And very specifically, what's going on from a local perspective here in Worcester, okay? And Jay, any thoughts on recent developments here in Worcester as we film this right before St. Patrick's Day? So everybody who supports St. Patrick, who incidentally was a Roman, but that's another story, look it up. In fact, last Sunday, they had the St. Patty's Parade here, and it was just great. And a lot of people really got jazzed because of it. I think it's great, personally. So anyway.
Well, usually we started state politics, work up to national, then down to local, and so on and so forth, and circle around and wherever the conversation goes. This time, we all know the world events, international events, and I think this is kind of strange that the same mentality that has caused us war in Ukraine and potentially World War III, we have the same attitude in City Hall. We have the radical anti-American left, led by newcomer Atal Hajiai. These people, they have this electric car fantasy they need to fulfill, and they voted for Joe Biden, who is causing the problems in the world, not Donald Trump. Donald Trump never started this. He effectively ended it economically. His foreign policy decisions, his oil, his energy policies was sinking Russia. China was waning economically. We had $2 gasoline prices, the lowest inflation adjusted, very low prices. We were drilling, we had energy independence, but because he may have said something naughty and mean, and then on Twitter, we had 81 million counted ballots, not voters, counted ballots, and we ended up with Joe Biden. Joe Biden, we all know this is a bipartisan thing. Joe Biden is dumb, but now he's dumb, and he's old, frail, weak, incoherent, and he's a leftist at heart. Weakness, peace through strength, war through weakness. And what's the first thing he did? He curtailed oil production in this company. If you compare oil production now compared to 2019, the last full year before COVID, the United States is producing 1.5 million barrels more than we are now. In 2020, that's about 400,000 gallons more barrels than now. So the permits are less permits, less oil production, yet we're buying from Russia. So and every time oil goes up in the world market, Putin's making more money. We are basically funding Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And anybody, and these city councilors, these radical anti-American leftists, Atal Hajiai, Sean Rose, Christian King, Sarai Vivera, and Tu Twee, whatever the hell her name is, they voted for this. They can't deny it. They voted for this. These fake ballots voted for this. And these crooked Democrat-run cities voted for this.
No nukes.
Period. This
No
is
nukes,
not Donald
baby.
Trump's fault.
Yep.
It's Joe Biden's fault. And that imbecile vice president, Kamala Harris, who is just totally insipid. She is doing more damage, I think, than, I mean, okay, she can spell potato correctly. So Dan Quayle must
Have
be
we
a
ever,
horrible-
have we ever seen that? Have we ever seen evidence that she can and does spell it properly?
Well, that's true.
You know, you're hypothesizing here. And considering the body of evidence that she's amassed in a little over a year, I think even that's kind of questionable. You mentioned Joe, okay? Forget the son, forget all the crooked dealings with the Ukraine, which is a whole different subject. Joe is a guy that has been, first of all, you mentioned his mental ability, okay? This is a guy that has had all sorts of scandals, academic scandals in the past. He's not the sharpest knife in the tool drawer, that's for sure. But forgetting that, it's also been said that Joe has been on the right side of every major international decision, period. And they've been tracking him for
Wrong side.
what did I say, the right side?
right side.
Pardon me, boom, the wrong side. And if there was a way to screw things up, just give it to Joe, he'll screw it up. By the way, those are not the words of Ron Motta. Those are the words of somebody who knows him pretty well.
You mean that clean, articulate guy?
The clean, articulate guy doesn't
described?
smell a lot. What's his name again?
Barack Hussein Obama.
That's what he had to say about this guy. And guess what? In that one instance, Barack was right on the money. This is what we have leading the free world. Now, the thing of it is, it's real easy to take shots at this guy who they kept in a bunker, and now we know why he was in the bunker. Because not the least of which is, he's got a real short fuse. Anytime they ask him a question that hasn't been carefully scripted, with the questioners being carefully, defined before they do their little press conferences, he either rambles on way off the point, or gets pissed, excuse me, folks, but that's what it is, real quickly. About a week ago, I remember some reporter asking him, Joe, you're an avowed Catholic, right? And the Catholic Church is against abortion, but you are pro-abortion. What do you have to say about it? And of course, he got, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, he got his Irish up real quick, and saving him, of course, was the lovely doctor, quote unquote, Jill Biden, who grabs her hubby by the hand and leads him away before he makes a real ass of himself. But he's done this on a regular and sustained basis. But my point is this: if you take a look at the kind of brain trust that he's running this country with, Kamala Harris, who has just become as big a punchline as anybody I've ever seen in politics, in my view.
And she's a Democrat.
And she's solid as a rock. That's why they don't lay a glove on her. She's embarrassed herself in Germany, in Poland, and literally everywhere she is. She has gaffe after gaffe. In fact, one of the interesting things that I heard about her, if you look at her speeches, and if you could look at them actually written out, which is what they do for her, because she's another one, get her off script and she's in deep water. It's almost as if you were back in college and you have a paper that has to be written, and where you're counting the words, because you have to have 500 or 1,000 words. She just throws a lot of cliches in there to build up the volume, but there's no substance that goes with it. But again, back to the brain trust running this country. Then you have our good friend who's the Secretary of State, and I don't know, this is a typical Washington guy, Blinken, Anton Blinken. Those are the big three. I like to call them, if you remember your school days, remember Winkin, Blinken, and Nod? Okay. Well, Winkin obviously is our lovely vice president, and we can fill in the blanks as to what she's winking at. Blinken is Anthony Blinken, and Nod is our nodding off president. That's Winkin, Blinken, and Nod. And then you look at some of the other people that are, giving him support. One that really infuriates me, and I'm doing a lot of talking, I promise I'll stop, is the fellow that I like to call Thoroughly Modern Millie. And Millie is our friend who's what is his title now? chief of staff?
I believe so.
Yeah, big job, big job. You know, he runs all the branches of the military. It's a big, and you look at his jacket and everything else, and his uniform, lots and lots of ribbons and everything else.
And then you look at Eisenhower.
Then you look at Eisenhower. But the thing about thoroughly modern Millie, in addition to being very, very pro-woke, and that's another subject for another day, this is also a guy who's supposed to be in charge of what's going on with military quote-unquote intelligence. And I know that's almost a contradiction. But the thing of it is, number one, while he served in that role under Trump, he was basically involved with a coup that if Trump did anything bizarre, like start a war, Milley has said this, that he'd be on the phone or communicating with his counterpart in China. Now, from the streets of Brooklyn that I came from, that's called treason, plain and simple, okay? Plus incompetence that he didn't see what was going on in Afghanistan, because about a month before it all went down in Afghanistan, on behalf of the intelligence, quote unquote, that they had, supposedly they had 350,000 well-trained, organized fighters with state-of-the-art equipment. And then about 2 weeks later, they're dropping their stuff and running like dogs, okay? Isn't he supposed to know these things? And then he said, well, you know, we couldn't see that. Well, I couldn't see it here in Worcester. It's his job, with all the intelligence that these guys have available to them, to know this. And then he compounds the felony after we run like dogs with our tails between our legs that the whole world sees. His next step is he masterminds or approves the bombing of that vehicle because it had some real bad key operatives. They had drones and they had all great intelligence. Yeah, well, what they did was kill kids, okay, which is tragic enough. War crimes, if you want to look at it that way. But then he strides to the microphone the following day, and look it up, guys, if you think I'm making this up. I wish I were, but I'm not. He then strides to the microphone very authoritatively and says, this was a righteous kill. It was a righteous kill. This is the guy that's leading our military. Okay? These are the people that we have. Now, we're going against on an international level, okay? Think about it. You've got the crazies in Iran that are just dying for some nukes. Because once they've got the nukes, here we go. I heard Netanyahu the other day say that if we sign another ridiculous pact with Iran for oil, okay, and more concessions, they will have the bomb within 3 years and maybe sooner, but there's a punchline to it. They'll have the capability not of making one bomb, like Hiroshima or Nagasaki. You can make a lot of bombs, okay? So, and there's a lot of information out there in the Bible that says the last great war will happen because of the Middle East. That's a perfect powder keg. That's powder keg number one. We have no way to stop that. Israel, once they know that our friends from Iran are loaded and ready to go, you can bet your booties they will go into Iran and level it if they have to. Iran will then place a call to Moscow. Moscow will then come in. We'll have to come in, and the dominoes will begin to fall on both sides.
So you've mentioned 4 countries: Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea.
Yep.
So we know what Biden's policies are. What was Trump's policies? And he made a big issue out of trade in 2016, the trade imbalances.
Yep.
Now, the more they started to favor us and bring manufacturing back, and the tax cuts and the regulatory cuts and all that.
Yep.
You had a booming economy here. China, and it takes a lot for them to go into economic decline, but they had those trends. Mm-hmm. So he was against China. He was against Putin. You can get along with an adversary for the sake of quote-unquote peace and reach for that, but he was no friend of Russia. There's a very smart, knowledgeable guy in the studio, in the sound room right there, Chris Pinto. He is in the whole WRCC realm of people, he's one of the most intelligent, knowledgeable, historically, and of current events you can meet in Worcester.
As much as it hurts me to agree with you on him, I have to agree with you, point by point.
And you're right up there. You've got a prettier face. But
wow.
Getting back to Mr. Pinto, he was saying this stuff about oil, the pipelines, the economics, and the brilliance of Trump's foreign policies with Trump. And so kudos to him. He was saying this over a year ago, and it's turned out to be true.
Yep.
He's a wealth of knowledge.
Well, he's a wealth of knowledge, and the real issue, back to Trump for a second, is that if you really check his comments about what's going down, in other words, Trump's ability to read the tea leaves, unparalleled in their excellence. He knew what was going to happen and told you up front, cause and effect relationships. He knew it, and unfortunately, he's right across the board, okay? And we now have, back to the examples we started talking about, you mentioned the little rocket man up in North Korea. All he's doing is just for fun, shooting up all sorts of missiles, getting closer and closer to Japan, just for fun. Why is he doing that? Because he can, and he's got Big Brother in China backing him up, okay? And we all know what's going on. Now, just to play the scene out, let's say that, again, to stay with China, let's say tomorrow or whenever they decide to take over Taiwan. What are we going to do at that point? Are we going to, nuke them? I don't think so. What happens if North Korea decides to come across the border, pardon me, with 2 million well-trained troops, and they decide to swallow up South Korea? We're committed to the teeth to defend South Korea. That's another linchpin for a world war. Obviously, the Middle East is a perfect linchpin. And then this whole Ukraine thing, if you listen to your president, Biden, talk about, he says, I can't read Putin's mind. This is prior to that. Well, I've known him a long time, and I've got him on speed dial. That Joey, he's a...
Oh, he even tweeted, Putin doesn't want me as president.
Oh, no, he's scared to death of him, just like Corn Pop was scared to death of him. Well, Putin reads the West, and very specifically reads Biden and company like a book. The premise, now we look at Putin as the devil, okay? He looks at the West as the devil. Why is that? From his perspective, now obviously, and I'm not in any way justifying his activities, which are basically savage. His idea is to break people, kill them, do whatever you have to do for the benefit of Mother Russia. That's his premise. In fact, something else I read recently, like today, there's a big rift among the Orthodox community, okay? And I forget the exact number, I apologize for it, but 40% of the Orthodox Christians reside in Russia. The rest of them are like Greek Orthodox and so on and so forth. Basically the same faith, report to the same God, okay? The difference is, there's an individual, it begins with a K, I forget the pronunciation of it, on the Russian side, who completely supports Putin and his activities. Why? Because of the demonic West, because the West is decadent and supports homosexuality, which is not at all where they're at in Russia, okay? So the premise being...
And Obama was pushing that in Ukraine, by the way. I think in his second term.
Yep, that's right. That's right. So they look at it that way, and then the other part that's a component of this whole issue, Ukraine also is a country that, as Jay and I were talking before the show, had the third largest nuclear capability in the world a number of years ago, and then...
Well, this is pushing 30 years ago, after the fall of the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall and that whole time period. Ukraine, as an independent country, had the third largest arsenal in the world. I guess it would have been second to then Russia and the United States. Bill Clinton comes in, and he basically talked them out of their nuclear weapons. I guess they went back to the homeland, so to speak. And then since then, we've had Pakistan and China and North Korea, and all of our adversaries are now nuked up. 9/11 happens, you got the Bush thing, we all know that. 20 years in Afghanistan, here comes Joe Biden. Again, another success of Donald Trump. He just very quietly withdrew troops. We've done about the last 25,000 or so. Biden comes in, totally screws it up. Putin and China, they must be looking at Biden. What a complete idiot. He's incompetent, he's weak, he has no idea what he's doing. We're going to start messing around on the Ukrainian border. I mean, why not? The Iranian nuke deal, I mean, that's back in place. Little Rocket Man, he's going to be thrilled right now. China's not going to listen to him. Kamala Harris, the VP, I mean, she's a joke. Who's third in line? Nancy Pelosi.
It's funny you said that. I saw something on the tube last night where she went into some rambling bit for about 5 to 10 minutes. If you think Kamala Harris is confused or the president is confused, let me tell you, Ms. Pelosi has gone around the bend. She's really, really showing her mental age at this point. And I don't like her for a lot of reasons, but when I saw her, and it hurts me to say this, I actually pitied her last night. And I pitied us, that if, God forbid, the other two go down, then you've got this one coming in. If she ever became president, it's just beyond terrifying. It really is to me at this point. We're in a world of hurt. But, back to the Ukrainian thing and the issue with Russia and Ukraine and everything else. Over the last several days, and they've tried to swallow this information up for a long time, the Ukraine has had a lot of bioweapons and a lot of development going on there, okay? Now, I'm old enough to remember post-World War II, okay, in the late 40s, early 50s, and so on and so forth, Russia really got into bioweaponry, okay? And they've been the leaders in the world of doing this for the last 70 years, okay? Ukraine supposedly has developed lots of stuff with the help of the West, specifically with the help of the great Satan, meaning the United States. So if for a moment you put yourself in the mentality of Putin and the Russians, and you've got an economy that's shrinking, you can't feed your people, what you want to do, first of all, is take over Ukraine so you can have the warm water port that they've always wanted, that you can have all the wheat to feed the Russian people, and that you can also really beat the living hell out of them for supporting the West by having whatever bioweapons that they have ready to unleash at Mother Russia. That's the mentality that they're using. And in fact, very recently, they've been shooting missiles that have come within 8 miles or 8 kilometers. I always get those two confused, and I know the difference. I just don't know the raw number of the Polish border. Now, the Polish border is very significant in this because Poland is, in fact, part of NATO. NATO basically means there's, I think, 24 different countries that all band together, and you hit one of my guys, we all stand together against Mother Russia. And I think, if I remember this, the population of the NATO countries is 24 or 25 times the size of Russia. But of course, Russia has a couple of bombs that they can use to neutralize that pretty damn quick. But nonetheless, these are the kinds of real high stakes that we're dealing with. It's particularly frightening. What do? Do we support Zelensky? And do we finally make sure that they can't...
Well, actually, that's the question. Are we? Because Mark Levin was on last weekend, and he made 2 points. If you want to support Putin and Russia, what would you do, given the situation? One is you would buy their oil, and you would cut back on yours. So the United States becomes economically diminished, and you strengthen theirs as best as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know sanctions are just totally idiotic. The second thing you would do.
Didn't we have sanctions with Chechnya too, going back?
I don't
And
remember.
Syria? We had,
I mean, Biden's put on sanctions on sardines.
no, but I'm saying that's
caviar.
what we've done in the past. Sanctions don't work with these people.
Right.
They used to squeeze in their people and eating dirt. Look at what they do in North Korea. They don't care.
And have we helped them yet militarily? I mean, is our stuff actually in the hands of Ukraine?
The Stinger missiles and other things, yes.
But shouldn't this have been done like a month ago? I mean, we knew that Putin was coming up onto the border. You knew something was going to happen. And if you know.
Oh, but we'll discuss things. We'll discuss things. But I know if it really gets hot, I know what's going to happen. President Biden will dash off a stern letter.
Well, actually, this entire conversation has been a moot point because Sean Rose, our brilliant, there ought to be a special election, and he can run for Jesus because he has saved the world from nuclear weapons.
It's an amazing thing.
And getting back to this radical anti-American city council, again, it's the King, Rose, Hajii, Twee, whatever her name is, Sarai Rivera clique. They voted for Joe Biden. They're the ones who are blocking, I don't know if I said this earlier, but Joe Biden curtails oil production. Atal Hajii wants to block gas stations from coming in. You know, based on the scope of their elected position, it's the same thing. We have inflation, which is essentially a tax. And we have Atal Hajii that wants to raise taxes, and she wants to create more poverty. The Biden administration is, you know, her fantasy, basically. The higher the gas prices are, the more you push the electric buses and all of this stuff.
We'll discuss that in the next show. A little
And
bit
then
more,
very
yeah.
quickly, we have a guy that,
I hate that band.
we had a guy.
We got a guy here. You'll have to tune in next week to hear part 2 of this conversation. There's a lot more to it, and we're going to be getting involved with the environment and very specifically the beauty of electricity and electric cars. Tune in, and in the meantime, price out one of these Priuses for about 60 grand. It's well worth it. Just ask Pete Buttigieg. He understands these things. He's very smart. Thank you for watching. Sorry this is cathartic for us, but it's a crazy world that we're in right now. Tune in next week, and we'll discuss a few more items. Thank you for watching. Good night.